Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me-
anyone have an answer?
Well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, my name is DJ, this is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and I have a new Nightmare Horror Commander. This is Umbris Fear Manifest. 3 blue black for a 1/1 Legendary Nightmare Horror. Umbris Fear Manifest gets +1/+1 for each card your opponents own in exile. Whenever Umbris or another Nightmare or Horror enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent exiles the top card of their library until they exile a land card. Oh, so Umbris is not a 1/1. Umbris can get really big. Look, there are a lot of ways to exile cards, and we're going to talk about some of them, but I think the first one we have to explore is the one on Umbris itself, which is Nightmares and Horrors. So the first thing we can do is just go Nightmare Horror Tribal. We even have tools like Maskwood Nexus or Reflections of Lityara to supplement this strategy. And to be honest, there are a lot of really cool and powerful horrors. I am slightly tempted by going Horror Tribal to include Thing in the Ice, flipping over to Awoken Horror, and bouncing everything else except for my entire board. I mean, if you have the instants and sorceries to flip this, Thing in the Ice is going to be a house. Of course, that's not the only horror-based removal spell. We've got Ravenous Chupacabra. We've got horror-based card draw with Phyrexian Rager. You can cycle away a Horror of the Broken Lands or a Void Beckoner. Forgotten Creation will let you wheel every turn, and you can weaponize that with Chasm Skulker and Psychosis Crawler, all horrors. We have more horror utility with Phyrexian Revoker, shutting things down, Overcharged Amalgam, brand new card, countering target spell, activated ability or triggered ability. Then we have Spellskite. This is going to be really good because your commander's key to this deck, and so any way that we can protect it is going to be amazing. Horrors are even good at milling cards. I know these aren't being exiled, but Consuming Aberration and Nemesis of Reason can get a lot of cards in the graveyard. We can worry about exiling them later. I think your commander is the best attacker on this whole team, but Grazilax, Ithalid Scholar, and Phyrexian Obliterator also swing hard and give you value when you connect. Another thing that I like about horrors is there's some big ones that have big effects on the game. Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, lets you cheat mana and is generally disgusting. Mind Flayer the Shadow isn't out yet because it's in the Stranger Things secret lair, but when it is, it's a horror. It's big and dumb, and it also exiles things. It feels good for Commander. And then Hullbreaker Horror, I made a short video on it because I like it so much, so I've got to give it a shout out here. Of course, we even have horror-based combos. Nightmare Shepherd, although not a horror itself, can basically turn the rest of your teams into horrors, bringing them back again, giving you your commander trigger over and over again. And Woe Strider is a horror that can help you sacrifice your team. So you get to rebuy ETBs, get to rebuy that trigger on your commander, and you could make things kind of spiral out of control. There's also Eater of the Dead, which helps you mill, and we do kind of want a little bit of mill in this deck, and along with Phoenix, God of Deception. Eater of the Dead can tap with Phoenix to mill and then untap itself by targeting a creature in the graveyard. Of course, we do have a ton of different effects that will exile your opponent's graveyard, so there will be non-bows with things like Eater of the Dead in the deck, and I'm okay with that. You know, I can't just focus all on horrors and not talk about the good nightmares. There are a few. Dread Presence is amazing. I love it. Doom Whisperer is solid. Use that life to get the cards you need. And Dream Eater is some tempo bounce, and it hits really strong in the air. There are also some cards that are not horrors nor nightmares, but are good enough to see play in this deck. I think I'm including Dothy Voidwalker, interrupts your opponent's creatures, sending them into exile, and the fact that you can rebuy one is amazing. Author of Shadows also exiles your opponent's graveyards. Anything that exiles your opponent's graveyards can give your commander a massive boost in power and toughness, but Author of Shadows can also snipe the important cards out of there for your own good. And then Una, Queen of the Fae, can mill your opponents out if we have infinite mana just winning the game, but with just a lot of mana, Una can create a bunch of fairies and make your commander way bigger. And then finally, there are a whole cycle of Eldrazi that dealt with exile. I'm going to focus on two of them. First, we have Sire of Stagnation, sort of a cheaper, not as good Consecrated Sphinx, but it works with exile, so I like it here. And then my favorite card in the whole deck is Oblivion Sower. 6 mana. Yeah, you get to exile 4 cards, but more importantly, target opponent, you just get to steal all those lands in exile. And if you've been exiling things this entire time, you know, nuking your opponent's graveyards, then you just get all the lands on your side of the battlefield. It ends up being this huge ramp spell attached to a 5/8. It's phenomenal and so satisfying. Let's not forget the exile of a very iconic planeswalker, Ashiok. Original Ashiok Nightmare Weaver, it only targets a single opponent, so I don't know if I like that. Ashiok Dream Render, on the other hand, shuts down everyone's search, and so I like that a lot, even though the exile is still going only after one player. And then Ashiok Nightmare Muse, I think this is the best because you can just keep ticking up, creating those 2/3s, and those will always exile your opponent's things and just get in the way. They're really annoying. So I'm pretty sure you can imagine the deck now. We have all of these different horrors and these different ways of milling your opponents, and they all kind of center around the commander, because the horrors don't do anything special unless your commander's on the battlefield. Exiling your opponent's cards could interrupt their plans, but it doesn't win you the game unless you exile their entire library. Same with mill. So with so much relying on your commander, we need to play the commander carefully and with intent. Whisper Silk Cloak protects your commander and gets it through for that lethal damage. If you ramp out your commander and protect it, you can probably 2 or 3 shot someone. In the mid to late game, you're 1-shotting opponents. Lightning Greaves provide protection but not evasion, but once they're on the battlefield, people have to be scared of your commander. And then Shadow Spear gives you evasion with that trample and that lasting power with lifelink, but it doesn't give you any protection. Of course, there's other ways to protect your commander. You're in blue, you can just counterspell things. I've included a cheap counterspell, Stubborn Denial. By the way, you're gonna have Ferocious because your commander's gonna be huge. And Fierce Guardianship, which is a free counterspell that needs your commander on the battlefield to work, and that's when you're gonna wanna counter things. Blue does have some spells to give your commander evasion, but I prefer these to be on lands because lands are kind of free includes. Shizo Death Storehouse can give your commander fear, it's pretty good. Rogue's Passage just makes it unblockable, which means that you are one-shotting opponents. And I keep mentioning one-shotting opponents because the amount of exile you're going to get is very reliable. Let's look at a card like Tasha's Hideous Laughter. It basically has each opponent exile cards from the top of their library until they exile mana value 20 or more. That's going to get like 6 or 7 cards from each opponent. That's 21 cards in exile. That means that your commander is killing someone. Of course, Tasha's Hideous Laughter really does nothing until your commander's on the battlefield. I think we have enough horrors and other ways to get things in exile that you might not need it. It's just kind of a nice one-shot card. I do like another one-shot card, Bitter Ordeal. We have enough mill in this deck that Bitter Ordeal and its Gravestorm, which is just awesome, can have you searching through your opponent's library and just taking out all their win conditions. I've actually had Bitter Ordeal hilariously mana screw my opponent by getting rid of all of the forests that were left in their deck, and they were just struggling for the rest of the game. That was pretty fun. Of course, if you want another infinite combo, there are loops that can let Bitter Ordeal exile your opponent's entire library. Speaking of exiling everything and being a non-bow with Bitter Ordeal, let's talk about Leyline of the Void. 2 black enchantment, everything that goes into your opponent's graveyard goes into exile instead. That's real good when you want things in exile. There are a couple other enchantments here that I like a lot. Chord of Cunning, this is going to get you some mill every single turn, but most importantly, give you the Monarch in a deck that likes to attack. I like that. Next we have Gravestorm, black for an enchantment. Basically you're going to force your opponents to exile cards, but you have so many ways to keep your opponent's graveyard empty, this is just going to have you drawing an extra card every turn. It's just a worse, but much more stylish Phyrexian Arena. You know, just like those horrors that cycled, we also have a few artifacts that do the same. Relic of Progenitus and Nile Spellbomb. You can always just get your card back, but you can also exile things out of your opponent's graveyard, giving you that value. And of course, there's Bojuka Bog and Scavenger Grounds being utility in your mana base. And then you round this out with classic blue-black control, always thinking of your strategy. We have removal with Reality Shift exiling something, Deadly Rollick exiling something. There's quite a bit of exile in this effect. There are even exile-based board wipes that give you an advantage. Extinction Event might be able to clear the way and leave your commander untouched. I also like Living Death. If your opponents have nothing in their graveyard, then Living Death is just a full-on mass reanimation just for you. Umbris Fear Manifest is great because it hits on a lot of different themes that we like to play as commanders. We like tribal, and so touching into nightmare and horror is great. We like mill. Mill can be fun, but also mill can be bad in 3 opponents, each of them having 100 cards. And so when you find other ways to weaponize your mill, that's great too. We also really like VOLTRON, and this is just a big smash you in the face VOLTRON commander. You just have a little bit of a different way of getting there. We also like having combo outlets and attacking on different axes, and this deck also has a bunch of cool combos in it. When you combine a bunch of fun ways to play the deck, it's going to play out differently every single time. Each game is going to feel different, and you won't get bored as easily. With so many different ways to play the deck, you can pivot mid-game, being able to capitalize based on what your opponents are doing, or you can have your deck adapt with you. Lean more into the Voltron aspect, lean more into the combo aspect, do what you want. There's a lot of flexibility with Umbris. I hope you like this deck. I also hope you check out Jumbo Commander's sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc. They're great. They've got awesome cards and games on there, and if you use the coupon code JUMBO5, you'll save 5% off your order. I also want to thank my patrons because this channel would not exist without them. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for watching this deck tech. I hope you like Umbris, and I'm excited to share some cool stuff coming out soon. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.